Released in 2006 for Xbox 360 and PC and the following year for PS3, The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion is nothing short of one of the greatest video games ever made. Developed by Bethesda Game Studios and published by Bethesda Softworks and 2K, this open-world action RPG plonks a player-created character into the province of Cyrodiil and tasks them with putting a stop to fanatical cult Mythic Dawn, who plan to open portals to the demonic realm of Oblivion. I probably don't need to tell you, that's very bad news indeed. Like its predecessors, Oblivion gave players the freedom to explore its massive open world at their leisure, meaning that they could get straight into the meat of the main quest right off the bat, or wander about speaking to NPCs and undertaking side quests to their heart's content. The game was a massive hit with everyone who was fortunate enough to play it, with critics showering the title with praise and lauding the expansive world, colourful and interesting characters, graphics, audio, and the sheer number of things there were to do. There was really only one problem with The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, and that was the fact that unless you had a high-powered gaming laptop, which was quite unlikely all the way back in 2006, it was rather hard to get your Tamriel fix on the go. Fortunately, in late 2006, a Climax Studios-developed PSP version of Oblivion was announced and was due to be released in 2007. Unfortunately, however, it was cancelled before it ever made it to release, despite the fact that fans of the series were incredibly excited about the project. But what happened to the game? How come we never got to experience a version of Oblivion that we could carry around in our pocket? And why does everyone involved with the project seem so reluctant to share what went wrong? I, for one, would like to know, and if you're still watching, I assume you would too. I'm Ben from TripleJump, and this is the true story of the cancelled PSP Elder Scrolls game. It was 2006, and by the time that the November edition of Official PlayStation magazine was published, the year had already delivered a smorgasbord of great games to players. Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence, Okami, Final Fantasy XII, and, of course, The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion all brought heaps of joy to gamers, but little did they know that OPM were about to give them another treat: the announcement of The Elder Scrolls Travels Oblivion for PSP. The news was delivered by the magazine as part of a larger piece on the PS3 version of Oblivion, with Todd Howard himself confirming that the PSP game was in development. He told Official PlayStation magazine that the PSP version of Oblivion is a very different game with a different storyline, and shared that unlike the home console edition, the title would be something of a dungeon romp with 10 large levels. Laffy Taylor, Travels Oblivion's producer, elaborated further, explaining that the PSP's hardware limited Climax Studios in terms of the openness of the world, but that there was every confidence that they could make the property work on the handheld device. Taylor also confirmed that the fundamental gameplay was to be strikingly similar to the original game, and that players would have the ability to create their own character, change their equipment, and make use of 18 of the 21 original skills from Oblivion. It really seemed like the developers had everything worked out, and although Travels Oblivion promised to be a different Elder Scrolls experience, it still sounded incredibly exciting. Unfortunately, despite a release being promised in 2007 and the option to pre-order being offered by a number of different outlets, an official release of The Elder Scrolls Travels Oblivion never saw the light of day. We've briefly covered what the game would have been like, but let's look at it in a bit more detail, shall we? Unlike Oblivion, which is an open-world RPG, Travels Oblivion was set to be more of a linear dungeon-crawling affair. The player would start by creating a custom character before embarking on a brand new quest that was set to run concurrently to the one in the console and PC version. Settings-wise, the main portion of the narrative would have taken place in High Rock, a location that fans of the series would recognize from The Elder Scrolls Arena, The Elder Scrolls II Daggerfall, and The Elder Scrolls Travels Shadow Key. However, the game didn't plan to confine itself to just one area of Tamriel, and PSP players would have also had the chance to visit Moonguard, Anticlair, Glenpoint, and Daggerfall, which, with the exception of Daggerfall, which appears in the Elder Scrolls Online, are locations that players haven't been able to visit since the Elder Scrolls 2 was released in 1996. Whilst the plot of the game would have run alongside that of Oblivion, it would have been distinct, and according to those working on the game, would have seen the player character helping a mage to try to stop the Oblivion crisis by tracking an antagonist known as Zerl, who would be one step ahead of the player character right until the very end of the game. In total, over 180 quests were planned, many of which would have tied into Oblivion, including one that would have heavily featured Lucien Lachance prior to his death in the main game. Smaller missions were also planned to help new players connect with vendors, such as the Burglar quest, which brought them face to face with the Armourer and would have rewarded them with a discount on weapon and armor repair. In terms of the gameplay, Travel's Oblivion was set to be quite different from Oblivion proper, leaning more into a hack-and-slash style, which would have been a better fit for the system. A number of RPG elements remained, however, and by utilizing different skills, players would have been able to tailor their experience to their preferred style of gameplay. The devs confirmed in official PlayStation magazine that the control scheme was heavily influenced by Metroid Prime, so players would be able to move forwards and backwards and turn using the analog stick, strafe by holding the L button, and look around the area with the R button. Based on all of the above, it seems that both publisher and developer were onto a winner, and it's a real shame that I can't get my hands on a copy. Or can I? Luckily for me, and by extension you, dear viewer, footage of the unfinished game and prototype builds from late 2006 to early 2007 were leaked online in 2016, and as such I've been able to try my hand at a few of the levels that may well have become The Elder Scrolls Travel's Oblivion. Shall we dive in? In an opening extremely reminiscent of the one found in Oblivion proper, the demo begins inside a jail cell. Unlike the home console version, however, it's not Sir Patrick Stewart who comes a-knocking, but rather a mage, who implies a man named Zerul has requested you be freed. Having fulfilled his purpose, the mage then eats a fireball and does a die. Context provided by the quest log suggests the player character has no knowledge of their past or how they came to be incarcerated. The disturbing dream being referenced here may well be an opening cinematic that would have played beforehand. By navigating to the quest description, it's plain to see just how authentically and unmistakably Oblivion this PSP port would have been. While some tabs weren't finished, the majority were near enough intact and showed your current status, inventory, spells, levels, and progress towards leveling up skills. An Iron Short Sword and Iron Shield and Flare and Restore Health spells are the standard loadout for the demo, all of which are assigned to a quick select wheel accessed by pressing the D-pad. Cross is attack, square is block, circle is use magic, and triangle jump, and as I began to make my way through the prison, attacking the variety of scamps and Mythic Dawn cult members as I did so, the developers' solutions for the lack of a second analog stick and 2 additional shoulder buttons became apparent. The Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion has terrible combat. Now I know that's not a controversial take, as all you do is flail wildly in the direction of your opponent, but because the PSP version only has one stick with which to steer and no way to move the camera easily, the addition of a lock-on button is a game changer. Not only does it make navigating the game a lot easier, but also makes fights feel a lot more focused. You can hold L to strafe and R to look around, but in the heat of battle, that's not really going to cut it. Regardless, I eventually came across a panicked soldier, seemingly the last one left standing, who told me I'd need to procure the key from a dead guard in order to proceed. Inside the chapel, I looted said key and was immediately set upon by at least a dozen enemies, which wasn't a problem as I'm very good at hitting things with my sword. One area where the lock-on solution wasn't helpful, however, was with bow-based combat. Arrows missed as often as they'd hit, and if you went off-piste and tried to aim manually, well, just, good luck with that. Arriving at the surface, I found a guard who'd locked himself in a gate. Very brave. He's not happy to see the player, as you're obviously a big dirty criminal, but said that if I retrieved the key his captain holds, he'll forgive my crimes and let me leave. So back down into the dingy depths I went once more, navigating caves and discovering the best T-posing man I've ever met. Just to think he's been down here, waiting for me, for over 15 years. T-posing. Magnificent. While down here, I tried out the sneak functionality, which didn't get off to a great start when a scamp spotted me immediately. I did then manage to sneak around behind a Mythic Dawn cult member, but he was invincible and uninterested in playing Stab the Man with me.
Having made it outside proper, we finally come face to face with Zerul, who beseeches us to help the injured until help arrives. As there's nobody to assist and no enemies to be slain, I made my way to the top of the burning Imperial Villa, only to find, dun dun dun, an Oblivion Gate. The inside of the Oblivion Gate is as you would expect, really. Red, covered in lava, confusingly laid out, chock full of really angry beings, it's all there. Progressing through the various zones will eventually lead you to another associate of Zerul, who thanks you for saving him and urges you to head to the tower. Once inside, a guard named Placeholder, which is an interesting family name, breathes his final breath after bravely surviving for as long as he could, and the tower itself is extremely similar to the layout of those found in the full game. So similar, in fact, that I have reason to believe the model may have been ripped in its entirety, as some staircases are too steep for players to climb. There's an area where you'd traditionally interact with the sigil stone to bring it all crumbling down, but in this build there's nothing to be found. It's safe to assume then that after closing the gate, this is the next zone you'd be loaded into. Here, Zerul congratulates you on your success, granting you a choice of rewards, be it coin, a Daedric longsword, a heavy iron shield, an iron bow, or the magic spell Power Flare. He then sends you to your next appointment, a rumour about a coven of witches in the city of Anticlair. Anticlair is represented in a few different ways in this demo build. One level shows a town not unlike Anvil that finds itself overrun with all manner of nasties. The other levels, seemingly connected, begin with that same zone, although all the enemies are gone, and proceeds to unfold into an extensive township filled with tight streets and little hideaways that continue over a 5-level radius. Shops and business signs and posters for the Imperial City Arena are littered around, although it's likely these are lifted from the main game for illustrative purposes. As I progressed through these levels, the city found itself in increasing levels of fortification and ultimately ruin, leading me to yet another Oblivion Gate. This one didn't have a level attached, thankfully, as I'd imagine it would be much the same as the one I'd just played through. However, a large portion of players' time in the Elder Scrolls Travels Oblivion would have been spent in the Hub, a safe zone full of quests, vendors, NPCs, and whoever the player might rescue whilst out adventuring. Our tour of the Hub begins with the Mages Guild, a 3-story building itself equipped with various vendors, each boasting an inventory pertaining to each of the schools of magic. One will even talk about a colleague in Cyrodiil who's researching Nirnroot, which is fun. There's even a basic quest in here where you have to deliver induction papers to a prospective member downstairs. Outside the guild is the Divine Square, filled with temple-like structures, statues, and NPCs. One particularly unpleasant guard named Razoga seems to have claimed your accomplishments as his own, looking down on you as just a prisoner. I attacked both him and his adoring fan just to see if the usual murder anyone you want approach was still in effect here. The result was that everyone did become aggressive, but they did no damage and received no damage. Seemingly, a bounty and prison infrastructure was yet to be implemented, if indeed it was planned at all. Moving to the Trade District reveals 2 buildings: the Perfect Shot, where players can purchase bows and arrows and practice their archery, and Vicarious Vixen, and in that, due to a chest on the first floor handily labelled Character's Locker, may well have housed the player when they were in town. The Tranquil Path was the next zone, and featured an impressive walkway surrounding a large water feature, but not much else. And finally, there was the Great Forge, a cave system home to a number of large furnaces and shopkeepes. The last few levels accessible in this build were clearly unfinished, and ranged from a cave and a path above a river to an open settlement next to a destroyed bridge and a cathedral-like structure complete with catacombs and undercroft. Finally, there's a dev room displaying a variety of armor and weapons. While some of the areas were part of the demo proper, a lot of them had to be selected from work-in-progress build menus, and I did my best to guess the correct order of them. The listed Oblivion plane demo, for example, was just the exit zone, with the others titled as work-in-progress. The main difference between these and the work-in-progress zones were the level of detail and number of NPCs, as some of them featured no NPC presence at all.
It's worth noting, however, that 1, the game wouldn't have looked anywhere near as good as it does in this emulator, as it would have been compressed heavily to run on a PSP, and 2, there's a good chance the names I've given to these levels and zones could be incorrect. While they are labelled as such, and I've described them as such, some obviously different areas share names, so all bets are off, really.
Interestingly, what I played didn't necessarily line up with our research. Talking to official PlayStation magazine, producer Laffy Taylor said it'd be a little more hack and slashy, a little more button mashy, but what I experienced didn't truly feel all that dissimilar to the console version, where you also largely mash the attack button.
Furthermore, the villain you're due to be chasing, Zerl, has a name that's practically identical to that of Zerul, the wizard who's on your side through the opening. Is it a case of names just not yet being finalized, or could he have ended up betraying the player character and turning evil?
Regardless, there's about 2 hours of content in this build all told, and while everyone looks like RuneScape characters, there's no voice acting, some of the menus aren't finished, enemies will regularly hit each other in an attempt to take a swing at you, and the build lacks the level of object manipulation that the home console version has. The PSP's companion Oblivion game was clearly taking shape in a manner that, I believe, fans of the full experience would have felt right at home with. But, alas, it simply wasn't to be. Following the announcement of The Elder Scrolls Travels Oblivion, a number of retailers, such as GameStop, began taking pre-orders for the game, and it was estimated that it would be shipped around April 2007.
The months came and went, however, and no portable Elder Scrolls experience materialized. Naturally, fans were somewhat concerned, but no formal announcement about the game's future was made, and players were left to make their own inferences when their deposits were returned in November 2007.
Somewhat bizarrely, the game was relisted for pre-order in January 2008, with a proposed release date of June that year, but again, nothing ever came of it. It was perhaps telling that the description on Amazon was identical to that of the home console version of Oblivion, despite the fact that, as Todd Howard pointed out, they were effectively different games.
What's most bizarre, though, is that Bethesda never formally cancelled the title and have been reluctant to speak about it in the years since. Rumour has it that developer Climax Studios ran into difficulties whilst working on the game, which potentially meant that it was costing more money than Bethesda was happy with.
A sticking point may well have been the choice of engine, as after initial work on Climax Studios' own internal 3D engine was taking too long, a pivot to the Renderware engine presented its own problems, including NPCs being unable to navigate multi-floor levels.
It's likely that the build I played today was from before this change, however, as it's been reported that in an effort to save time and resources, the game's dungeons were to be changed from their existing, unique, winding structure to simpler, modular areas that could be slotted together.
Some fans have also speculated that although the game may have been a lot of fun had it ever hit shelves, it just wasn't the groundbreaking spectacle that players had come to expect from Bethesda, and honestly, if the engine rumours are to be believed, I can see their point. What I played showed a great deal of promise, but the scaled-back version we may have ended up with would not have left the same impact. Another theory is that Bethesda were concerned with the viability of the PSP as a platform for the game. Although the PSP sold well overall, the uptake in the West, where The Elder Scrolls is most popular, might not have provided a reasonable return on investment, and whilst Sony shifted around 80 million units in total, only around 32 million of those went to gamers in the US and Europe. It's absolutely a possibility that Bethesda, upon seeing that the Nintendo DS was outselling the PSP 2-1, decided to cut their losses rather than putting out a title for a handheld where they might have failed to recoup their losses.
But what's the true story here? I reached out to a number of individuals involved in the project to see if I could find out more. And you know what? Of the people I spoke to, nobody wanted to talk publicly.
Having worked in development myself, I can personally attest to the legal gymnastics that developers and publishers perform to ensure their staff remain tight-lipped. Even now, some 15 years after its apparent cancellation, those non-disclosure agreements still loom large, so it's completely understandable that everyone involved remains sworn to secrecy under threat of severe legal action.
What I did learn in my interactions with these folks, however, is that everyone who worked on The Elder Scrolls Travels Oblivion was really proud of their efforts. They felt they were onto a winner, and with just a bit more time, we all might have seen the fruits of their labour. What remains today is a tantalising tale of what if.
I remember falling in love with Oblivion when it released, and I remember being all the more excited at the prospect of being able to take Oblivion with me when I learned of the development of its PSP iteration. With 2 Grand Theft Auto titles and a Monster Hunter game successfully making a home on the handheld, surely Bethesda could follow suit, right?
Wrong. Whether it was an overly ambitious developer, an impatient publisher, or simply hardware limitations, The Elder Scrolls Travels Oblivion just wasn't meant to be.
What's especially frustrating is that if players got anything close to the vision presented in the leaked prototype, they'd have gone wild for it. And while the relentless march of time has forced us all to accept the game has long since been abandoned, those first few years without any official word on its status was far from ideal for fans.
Still, at least a new version of Skyrim will be due out any day now, so, there's that. Oh, and if this video didn't make you want to boot up Oblivion, you're a filthy liar. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.